Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Riptide Collective. It's your host, Nix, and I'm here to bring you some gameplay by another Riptide fanatic, Limitless, who will be showing off a hybrid list for Riptide today, playing into the new Kassai. We are aware that the new Kassai doesn't have all of her tech available yet, but Limitless still does a great job explaining how and why the cards were chosen for this hybrid style build. And I hope you enjoy the gameplay and look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Alrighty, welcome guys. Going to be doing a little bit of some commentary over a game that I played against Kassai. Now, keep in mind this is not a perfect game, and Kassai is not a complete hero. She will probably have more cards coming out when Heavy Hitters releases. But I just wanted to use this video as an example to sort of talk about the deck and some play lines and yeah, just sort of showcase the things that this deck can do. So this is a fatigue or a hybrid fatigue deck, and when a lot of people think of Riptide, they don't really think of fatigue because he doesn't have a weapon that he can swing with each turn. He only has his bow and his arrows and whatever other attacks you've included in the deck. So generally, it might seem that like it's very easy to run out of cards, but um, given the power level of all of the arrows that you run in this deck, I actually find it's quite common to fatigue other decks. Because they are spending more time, they're spending more cards blocking than you have to spend to attack with. And so naturally, over the course of the game, they actually end up running out of cards before you do. And then if that's not the case, you do have the quiver and you do have endless arrows. Um, but yeah, so getting onto the game, just some general play lines to begin with. I probably misplayed the first turn, to be honest. I should have set up an arrow in Arsenal. Um, this deck is running 6 pumps. It's running 3 Melting Point and 3 Deadeye, which might seem weird because there's no way to put aim counters on your arrows, so you're never going to get the additional effects of those cards. However, they are 3 block, so in a pinch, if you need to be defensive, they are much better than any other pump that you could run. Um, and even just providing the pump alone, they can turn some cards into really nasty attacks that are really annoying to block. We're going to see an example of this right here, where I play this Heat Seeker for, I think it's 10. So this is getting, yeah, 10. It's getting the +1 from the Dreadbore, it's getting +4 from the Melting Point, and it's a base 5. So it's, in this case, yep, it's going to take some armor from our opponent. If you pitch stack some buffs alongside some arrows for the late game, when your opponent doesn't have armor left to block with, this could be really a crippling play because they're going to have to block with 3 cards most likely to stop your on hit coming through. So in this case, my on hit went through, which means that I got the face up arsenal. I also had the card left over, so I got the face down arsenal, and I'm left with a 6 card hand after playing. I think I blocked before, and then I played a 3 card hand. So 4 card 10, but then draw a card. I'm not sure, something along those lines. The maths is not quite working in my head right now, but um, yeah. So at this point, I'm still trying to figure out quite what Kassai does. Whether it's better to go aggressive into her or try and fatigue her, or quite what's the play. because there's several different play styles that you need to uh, become familiar with when playing this deck. Um, it's it was initially built to fatigue, and so one play style is to just run everything that you have and block out really just block out all the damage that you possibly can. Don't let any damage leak through, and this will be against heroes like a Rhinar or I think a Fi. Anyone who's looking to have these, oh, definitely Bolton as well. Anyone who's looking to have these big turns where uh, they throw a ton of damage at you, and there's no way that you can block, even if you have like two arsenals full of traps and you have a full hand of traps. Like these decks are looking to push like 20 to 30 damage, and so if you haven't been blocking throughout the game, you've been letting damage leak throughout the game, you might get hit with one of these big turns and you won't have the life economy to take a little bit of damage on that turn, and that can cost you the game in that case. Um, so that's one play style for the deck. Another one is something I think of as like a lean fatigue build, where you are running closer to 60 cards. You're probably running the pumps and you're probably siding out the traps that aren't relevant for the matchup. Um, and this is what you play into heroes that are looking to play their whole hand. So this kind of Fi again, but mainly I think Azalea and Dash IO are the sort of decks that you want to play like a lean fatigue um, list into, because if you can threaten them with on hits that force them to block, they're not going to be able to play their whole hand. It's really going to weaken their turns. It's going to give you more time to be alive in the game, which means you can trigger more traps. It means you can get closer to your end game where you've pitch stacked some pumps and some arrows together. Um, Particularly against Dash IO, you will be looking to fatigue her in this way, um, because she's going to be boosting to try and go wide on her turns, and that means that she's just going to run through the cards in her deck far faster than you will. Um, so yeah, I think we've got a full trap hand here. The last way that you can play the deck is as like a race aggro build, which is not as effective but sometimes necessary. Um, it's escaping me now what the other matchup is, but one of the matchups that you would want to play sort of race to face aggro is Dromai. Um, as the game goes on, she just gets too many dragons. We don't have enough poppers. But even if you do go face, don't expect to win. It's a pretty nasty matchup. Getting one damage here from the boulder trap. I think I put that -1 counter on the Iron Song Virtue, which is it's always really good to put -1 counters on Temper armor or Battle Ward armor first if you can, because that's going to be one -1 counter for 2 points of armor blocking value. I decided to block here with the Inertia Trap as well, just to boot them off an arsenal, deal one extra damage. And yeah, look, sometimes you get hands like this where it's just traps and you just have to arsenal and set up for the next turn, but that's usually okay. You're usually looking to block with about 3 cards a turn anyway, so I arsenaled the take cover. You always want to arsenal take cover over any other trap, except for Pitfall Trap or any other Crucible traps that you may run. The reason is take cover can let you load Crucible Trap if you play it from Arsenal and you don't have a second card in Arsenal from New Horizon. That's a really important rule to remember, is that reload only works if your Arsenal is empty. So I think at this point I'm trying to decide whether or not to block this for 4 with the take cover or to block with the tar pit trap for 3, take 1, ping 1. And I decide to go with the tar pit trap because even though I'm taking a damage here, they've played an 0 for 4 and tar pit trap is essentially an 0 for 4 as well. And I've decided that they aren't really running any attack actions with on hits that I care about. I haven't seen any CNCs. I haven't seen, to be honest, I haven't seen any other attack reactions than the Ravenous Rebel. So the triggered effect of tar pit trap is not so relevant. So I decided to keep the take cover in case they come in with a bigger attack afterwards. I was a little surprised to see in this Kassai list that they didn't run Nourishing Emptiness, because as they're doing right now, banishing cards from their graveyard, I feel like Nourishing Emptiness would be pretty good. You can always make sure that your graveyard is clean and not, and you can always get the Dominate and the +1 Intellect from Nourishing Emptiness in that way. But I'm sure they know what they're doing. So there you go, perfect example. They came in with a 4 attack afterwards, and I had the take cover saved up to make sure that I could block that. So there's a couple of decisions that you could make right here, actually. One thing that I didn't really do much in this game was set up a second arrow in Arsenal, and you might have to take a turn off to do that. And it might seem bad, but really what you're trying to do is you're banking a card that you can wait for a pump to play with, and then you get to Arsenal another card like regular. Of course, keeping in mind that reload won't really work if you have that second Arsenal, but most of the time it's worth it. And I didn't do it in this case because I just felt it was more important to keep pressure on the Kassai. Not sure, that might not be the move going forward. I think you kind of do want to let Warrior do their thing with the whole hand, because then they're more likely to play stuff that gives their attacks go again, stuff that pumps their attacks, and they're more likely to play attack reactions, which obviously all 3 of those things are exactly what you want to see your opponent do when you're playing Riptide. So just choosing to Arsenal the Death Touch on its own there. And something that I realized as this match went on, I mean, they played a blue there, but they're not running too many blues in this list. And I think because Kassai primarily works off of red and yellow cards being in a graveyard, they're not going to run many blue cards once the list gets figured out. So that's an important consideration when choosing cards to bring back with, like, Codex of Frailty, or choosing between, oh, do I attack with Remorseless, do I attack with Blood Rot, Infecting Shot. In that case, I think Infecting Shot is better because it's less likely that they'll be able to pay for the Blood Rot token. And here I choose to take 3, I believe, and kick them off of an Arsenal. I always find it interesting when you manage to get all 3 plague tokens on your opponent at once. But they had a play to use all of their cards anyway, so the inertia token didn't pull so much weight. Now they don't really have much in their graveyard, so I think I decide that it's fine to let them hit with the Cadaverous. And I think given how this match ended up, you do have to take a bit of damage. You can't just fully block out against Kassai. Yeah, she's not playing like the Art of Wars, or she's not playing Three of a Kind. She's not playing Blood Rush Bellow. You know, these decks that draw cards quickly to try and overwhelm you. they're the ones that you need to fully block out against. But otherwise, I think you need to just trade for value a little better, because obviously, your attacks are really good if they hit, and your traps are really good if they trigger. I choose to pitch the intoxicating shot here because I figure it's better to have blues in the deck. So yeah, a lot of people have built Riptide as an aggressive deck, um, and you might ask like, well, why not just build it like an aggro deck? Why not just build it like a worse Lexi? But I think the answer is on the Riptide card itself. He lets you load your arsenal uh, a lot, which is good, but the trap damage doesn't really help. It doesn't really do a whole lot in an aggressive list. And I think when you look at other heroes that are aggressive, like Fi, uh, his hero ability really does benefit from like this aggressive go wide strategy. So I think if you play an aggro Riptide list, you're sort of banging your head against a wall a little bit. You're not making the most of the hero. But that's one opinion. E-Strike, good card. Choosing draw a card, I think, is the highest value play because if a card is worth 3 value, then choosing draw a card is like, um, well, it basically makes E-Strike an 0 for 5, you know? So I believe Kassai's game plan here was to build up a whole bunch of gold tokens and then turn them all into Centauri soldiers or whatever they're called, cell swords. Um, but they never really, spoilers, they never really got that off. I'm not sure if they were waiting for more gold tokens or maybe it was their first time playing Kassai. So yeah, back on some more Riptide strategy. Um, without the pumps, when you do have to play defensively, the cards chosen in this list are chosen because their on hits typically represent um, like 2 or more value. So, for example, Command and Conquer, as you can see in my hand there, um, if you play that, you pitch a yellow and you play Command and Conquer. So there are your 2 cards. You get 6 damage, which makes the math work out to about 3 cards each. Sorry, 3 value per card. And if it hits, it potentially destroys the card in their arsenal. Which, if a card is worth 3 value, it takes 3 value away from the opponent, which is it's similar to you gaining 3 value. Um, so it's almost like a 2 card 9 in that case. Infecting Shot with Dreadbore is the same deal. There was network errors there. That happens sometimes. Infecting Shot with Dreadbore is the same deal. Pitch to load Infecting Shot with Dreadbore gives it +1, so it's now a 2 card 6. But if it hits, then it deals another 2 damage by virtue of the Bloodrot token. So it's a 2 card 8. So yeah, all of the attacks that you're playing are trying to threaten this additional value on hit. And when your opponent sees that you're going to get all this value, if they let your attacks hit, they're going to be incentivized to block. Because it essentially I'm doing air quotes that you can't see, makes their cards block for 4 rather than blocking for 3. So it's value for them to do it, but what that actually means in the long run is it means that they can't use their cards offensively. And in this way, we're technically reducing the value of their deck throughout the game, um, which is quite a central strategy to Riptide, I believe. You've got the frailty traps that are reducing the damage of weapons. Uh, you've got like tar pit trap there, which is removing the on hit from attack actions. Just yeah, as the game goes on, the way that Riptide is winning is not necessarily by presenting like super efficient 0 for 4 damage cards like a more aggressive deck might, but really you're trying to find ways to limit the amount of value that your opponent can get out of their deck, and then by doing that, as the game goes on, Riptide's a very, very consistent deck. So you're very easily able to always get the baseline of 3 value per card, or you're always able to um, like get between 3 and 5 value per card, really. So the longer the game goes on, the more opportunities you have to play your cards above rate, and you'll eventually win if you manage to do that successfully. So this is a bit of a shit play, to be honest. Because they don't have an arsenal, I'm not really threatening any kind of on hit. So it's just a 2-card 6, so 3 value per card. It's the sort of play that we want to avoid when we can. It may have been better to just arsenal, but I don't know. It felt good to get 5 damage in there. That's another aspect of playing Riptide, particularly now that we've got Reel In. This game's a really good example of where Reel In can be useful. I say that now, but I didn't actually use Reel In a way that was useful, but this game did make me realize how you can use Reel In to be useful. But yeah, so another aspect of the strategy when playing Riptide is that you are very favored if your opponent gets to low life early on. Because if they're at low life and they can't afford to take the damage that you're presenting, now every single attack that you throw at them has like this additional on-hit effect that they have to worry about. And the on-hit effect is death. But so yes, if you get them low early, then they are constantly having to block you out. Their turns are weaker, and you can actually make them scared to play big turns when they have the room to, because it will happen. You will eventually draw all your traps, and then they'll go, oh, cool, they didn't do anything on their turn. I can finally try and win back some tempo in this game. But if they're at low life, that's not going to be a good idea for them, because you're probably going to have a handful of traps. And if they're at low life, your traps are going to ping 1 damage each. They might die to trap damage. So if you can, if they let you, your opponent losing life early on is super, super good for Riptide. Things get a little more challenging in matchups against Bravo, because they also like to block out quite a lot, and they like to run all their sigils. So you can be at turn like 15 and they're still above 40 life. It's a bit of a rough matchup, but it's doable. It's definitely doable. There's lots of room for the Bravo player to misplay in that matchup. But yeah, that's the sort of matchup where it really does come down to fatigue, and it comes down to watching the cards in deck, and you really do need to try and pitch stack your buffs with your arrows, because as you get later on in the game, thanks to Dreadball, they're not going to be playing that many defense reactions from hand. They might arsenal one or two here and there, but a lot of the time they'll actually just be pitching their attack reactions because they have like no other option. And so if you get to a late game with a more control style deck like Bravo, and they have a handful of defense reactions, it can be really, really good if you've pitched your pumps alongside something like a Remorseless, which can not only shut off defense reactions from hand, but also from Arsenal. And then if you pump Remorseless and you're presenting 9 or 10 damage, and they can't really block much of it, that's going to be where your opportunity lies to really get good damage in against that hero. And those sorts of plays are what win you matches. You know, finding the point at which your opponent can't really handle the threats that you're presenting, or yeah. So for control decks, that's typically towards the end. If you can play some sort of evasion around all of their defense reactions, and then against aggressive decks, that's typically also at the end of the game when they run out of cards to attack you with. And then you start getting some breathing room to attack them. So that's ultimately why this is considered a more fatigue deck. I suppose control would be another word for it. The thing about fatigue is that people hear it and they think, oh, just block with every card, every turn, don't take any damage. But that's not necessarily the case with Riptide. He's a little bit more of the offensive fatigue style. And yeah, maybe you call that control instead. So I think here I finally decide I'm going to set up a face-up card in Arsenal. I probably could have loaded it the turn before off Riptide's ability and played it, but I don't know. Like I said, this is my first time playing against Kassai, the new one. So I was just sort of trying out things. This is the low roll in terms of hands where you might draw real in, because you don't have any other blue to pitch into it. So it's a little awkward if you do need to block. But thankfully it is blue, so it's very useful in this deck, and we can use it on our turn. But yeah, also this early in the game, I don't think you want to use Reel In because it forces you to shuffle your deck, and much like the narrative that LSS has pushed around Riptide, I also believe that you really do want to be setting up, you want to be laying a trap for your opponent, figuratively as well as literally laying traps in your arsenal. But in this case, you're setting your pitch stack to be full of those pumps and arrows, or you're pitch stacking so that you see like a trap that you can play from hand next to a crucible trap, so you can play the trap from hand to load the crucible trap and get around that restriction, because the crucible traps are insane value. Anyone who tells you that they suck hasn't figured out how you're supposed to play them. I only run Pitfall Trap in this list. I'm not sure if we can quite justify running the other two just yet, because they are a little bit more situational. Like Tripwire Trap it's an 0 for 5 thanks to the trap damage from Riptide, and that's good. But its ability to turn off on hits. First of all, if they can pay through it, kind of feels bad. But if they can't pay through it, it's still only relevant in certain matchups. Test. Cool. Uh, Headset turned itself off halfway through the video. Um, anyway, I was just saying with Rock Slide Trap, you don't really want to be playing it in every matchup because not every matchup cares about their attacks getting -2. Maybe they just go wide and then it's like, cool, whatever. I'll just hit you with another attack. So they're not going to pay. And then you've played, it's still an 0 for 3, which is on rate, but you don't want to be playing on rate cards that have restrictions to play them. So yeah. I think this match actually ends up being pretty close. I think once Kassai actually comes out and we get to play against her a little bit more, this will be quite an easy matchup for Riptide because she does trigger so many traps, and that's usually the telltale sign of whether or not a matchup is going to be easy or hard for Riptide. You just get so much damage through traps in a matchup like this. You don't have to worry about forcing damage through from your arrows. I didn't really think about pitch stacking buffs for this matchup, mainly because I was also focused on what is this new hero? What do they do? But I suppose if you really wanted to bully someone, you would pitch stack properly, and then you would trap them all up, and then you would come through with all this unblockable damage, and they would go home and write a tweet to LSS about how Riptide's broken, and everyone would laugh at them because he has such a reputation for that not being the case. Anyway, so that's sort of that play there is what you always are looking to try and do. Play one arrow that comes in for 6, threatens to deal more damage if it hits, so they block you out with 2 cards. You can see, like, even though they've been swinging with their weapon most turns, we're still pretty even in terms of cards in deck. So, even if we were at higher life totals at this stage in the game, and the game did go down to a really fatigue grind style end game, I think would be okay because you've at the end of the day you've got your quiver. You recur a battering bolt, an endless arrow, and an intoxicating shot, and you hit them with the battering bolt to force whatever cards they still have to block with out, and then they end up just left with like defense reactions, and then you start loading endless arrow with dreadbore and coming in for 5 on hit, return it to your hand, and that's how you get around the whole Riptide doesn't have a weapon. As long as you keep hitting with endless arrow, you never run out of cards. And with dreadbore, endless arrow coming in at 5 means that if they only have defense reactions left, they can't block with them from hand, so they can only block with at most 1 defense reaction from arsenal, and that is outside of unmovables only going to ever be a block for 4. So you're still going to get your on hit. You of course do want to make sure that they don't have armor by that stage, but yeah. I think I blocked with 3 sync blows on this turn. This is a really nice Riptide play. Whenever you have a blue and a battering bolt coming in for 7 is great because it's that break point where it's super awkward. They can just block with 2 cards, but then you're still going to do 1 damage, and if they have any reactions left in hand, they're going to lose additional life from those. Of course, in this case, Kassai is actually pretty good, or I guess Warrior is pretty good at blocking that breakpoint, or breakpoints in general, because they've got the Valiant Dynamo. I was going to talk more about, the specific plays that I made in this game, but I've never actually done a discussion about the deck itself, and so that kind of came to mind first and foremost. But at least for anyone who's interested in Riptide gameplay only, they can just mute me and watch the game. So this is nice. They give it go again. We trap it. I didn't use Collapsing Trap because they don't have anything in hand. Doesn't make sense. The legendary traps that Riptide has are typically better the more turns you can hold on to them. Which sounds weird, but the idea is like, on a turn like this, yes, you can play Collapsing Trap, you can deal 1 damage, whoop-de-doo, but you're not going to get the effect of Collapsing Trap, which is really strong, mind you, and also one of the best, I think actually the best trap that we have when it comes to progressing the Fatigue game plan. So the more turns that I hold on to Collapsing Trap, either in hand or arsenal, or I pitch it away and see it later, the more opportunities I have to see it on a turn where I can really make the most of it. For example, like if Kassai was to attack with a Ravenous Rabble, and then I Collapsing Trap, and I make Kassai discard 3 cards, that's 3 cards out of her deck for the cost of 1 card for me. That's really, really good value. It's also a really nice card against Dash.io after they Tome of Findle, High Octane, whatever else they want, and they're sitting there with with half their deck in their hand, and they attack with go again. You go, cool, discard it all. That's a serious consideration for them, given how much that they have to boost. So this endgame was a little awkward because I didn't pitch stack, but what we're trying to do at this stage is pretty much just close it out with traps. They trigger enough of our traps, and that this should be possible. Oh, here we go. It's still not great, but it's better than nothing, right? We get to force them to discard 1 card, which actually turns out to be really relevant because watch the card that they discard. In the swing. So they have the resource to attack again anyway, but I probably, I don't know actually. It just would have been far more awkward to block than it already is if they had in the swing as well. And particularly at this life total, I don't really want to be getting blown out by an attack reaction when I don't when I have a Crucible Trap in hand that I can't put into my arsenal. Yep, another one of these D tier plays. Command and Conquer when they have no arsenal. Oh well, at least they're. See, this is what I'm talking about before. They're at 6 life. I may only be threatening 6 damage, but it has the on hit of your opponent loses, so they have to block it. I always like seeing the opponent blocking my cards. Then I know that I don't have to deal with them on my turn. I suppose that's the enjoyment of Riptide ultimately, is that it feels very interactive. You're doing a lot of attacking and blocking, they're doing a lot of attacking and blocking. There's tons of back and forth, which some matchups you don't really see that. Some heroes you don't really get to do that. Codex of Frailty is such a good card. If you have anything other than a blue, you can always just get back Death Touch or Infecting Shot or whatever you want. By first playing the Codex, loading the card, like I'm doing here, and then trenching it away. Alternatively, you could load with Dreadbore, not actually load anything, have 2 resources floating, and then play Codex, get back Battering Bolt, swing for 6. It's an arrow, so they won't be able to play defense reactions yet again from hand. But in this case, because they didn't have any armor up, I wanted to go with the Infecting Shot because this is when I realized I don't think that they're running too many blues. So even though it's still easy to block, and look, maybe I should have gone for the Battering Bolt in that case. Even though it's easy to block, I felt like that was the gap in Kassai's strategy that I had to try and abuse to win. Maybe if I had paired Infecting Shot with a pump like Dreadbore and Deadeye and gone in for 9, that could have been a bit more nasty for her to have to deal with. So they play the reaction, which means we say yippee, please mill 2 cards and take a damage, and the attack's blocked. Thanks for coming. And then, yeah. See, a lot of people say, oh, maybe the Riptide traps would be so much better if they blocked for 4. That would be so broken. If they blocked 4, dealt 1 damage, and had, like, additional effects, you're looking at, like, an 0 for 5 or 6 or more value in that case. I think, like, at 3, they are exceptional when you can trigger them, and they are on rate if you can't trigger them. And, you know, in the case of Pendulum Trap, at least it still pitches for 2. So here I'm about to do what I was talking about earlier, where you have Codex and you have a blue. The difference is I also have a 1-cost pump in Arsenal, which means I don't have to waste a resource on Dreadbore. I actually get to turn Dreadbore into 3 damage, which is the idea behind behind Deadeye and Melting Point. They block for 3, and then in the situation where you actually have them left over in hand and you can use them, instead of just getting the +1 from Dreadbore, now instead you get +3 or +4, and that's really good for your fatigue strategy because now it becomes even harder for your opponent to block. It's going to mean that on their turn they have even less cards to swing back with, so it really hurts their tempo. Meanwhile, you're still threatening the really dangerous on hit. This, I gotta say, this Kassai has done a good job of keeping defense reactions in their arsenal to make sure that they can always play them to my arrows. But now, with the opponent at 3 life here, if I had remembered what my like third cycle of pitching was, I think I probably could have won on this turn because I could have. What's I think it's another Deadeye in my arsenal, but Kassai gives the attack go again, so I then deal 1 damage with the tar pit. I think I could have trenched away the Deadeye, pitched 5, pitched 6 into reel in, found all of my traps, and then reloaded a pitfall trap, which they would have been able to pay for. But if I wait for them to do their next attack, then they would have died. So I could have won on this turn, but you know that's the nature of learning new cards and learning new matchups. And I also just really wanted to swing for 12 with Battering Bolt. It's a greedy play. So I end up with no arsenal afterwards. But see, that Battering Bolt was sitting there in my second arsenal slot for ages. Ages and ages until I found the pumps, and now I get to present something like a Battering Bolt for 12. If they had any defense reaction in hand, this would have been game over. However, I think they do manage to full block it, but it costs them pretty dearly. Because yeah, you can see they've got a bunch of 2 blocks. Well, they got 1 2 block in there. So if they didn't have those boots, it would have cost them a tunic. If they had any defense reaction, it would have cost them the game. Once again, could have won this turn because of a sneaky little trick with the Centauri Sabers that I didn't realize until next turn. But if I'd actually blocked with the Remorseless, I could have then blocked with the Buzzsaw, loaded the Pitfall, blocked with the Pitfall, and that's 2 damage from traps. This is why you're so much stronger in these endgame situations, is because, you know, leaking 1 or 2 damage matters so much, and Riptide is so good at forcing you to just lose that extra life. But yeah, like, even look at the deck sizes. It's pretty close. If I had decided earlier on that I wanted to play a more fatigue plan, I could have played it a little bit differently. But ultimately, like, I'm in a good position, or not great, but I'm in an okay position to recur Endless Arrow, and Battering Bolt and Intoxicating Shot, and just strip their last couple of cards with a big Battering Bolt, and then keep swinging with Endless Arrow for the win. But I think here is where I figure out the Centauri Saber trick. So there you go. Game's about to be over. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully we start to see some more results with Riptide. It's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of work that's been put into this hero by lots of members in the community. So I think we're a little overdue for some results, but I hope you enjoyed.